Okay, welcome to this week's episode of KUDEN Radio. This is episode 289, which means that our pre-New Year's episode, gonna roll over to 290, and I don't know, 10 weeks after that, we'll be celebrating 300 episodes. So anyway, I am flying solo for this one because not only did Sensei Alexander get married today, but apparently he also got a stomach bug that, according to him, we would not want to have him assisting from the location where his production booth would have to be. So I'll take care of things. Anyway, all right, so let's kind of set things up, right? So for those of you who are on Facebook, a couple of days ago, last week, give or take, right, I posted a meme that asked a simple question. And that question was, what's the most difficult skill or technique you've mastered, or at least gotten decent at within the art, right? And, different people answered differently, some with techniques, some, some about ego, things like that, right? But one specific student answered, finding a way despite setbacks and unforeseen changes. Okay. And I thought that was brilliant, right? Not that the other ones weren't good. It's all good, right? But playing into what we're focusing on for this episode, right? But what I replied was, don't regret that, right? How else could you practice NIN? How else could you practice patience and perseverance, right? Way too many people think conditions have to be perfect before they can train, before they can even start, right? Before they can live, right? But it's actually the imperfect, the difficult, and the seemingly impossible that are actually required to truly practice Ninpo, right? Anyone. I was told this by not just teachers in the art, but military leaders and just mentors all over the place, right? Anyone can function when things are easy, right? Ninjutsu training was never designed for easy conditions. And that answer, that one line, right? Anyone can function when things are easy. That's what tonight's episode's all about, right? So again, I'm my own, not only the host and the teacher and all that, but I'm also the production guy. So I'm gonna jump around here and make things happen, right? But we'll talk about that and more when we get back.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
All right. We are back. Let's officially get this started. Let's pop things up where it's supposed to be. There's that. All right. See, folks are still trickling in. Again, I'm flying solo for this one since Alexander has a stomach bug. So he is not in a condition to be helping during this episode. So we'll take care of it. All right. And as a reminder, this is part 2 of a 3-part year-end, what I'm calling a transformational series. Right. Last week we discussed in part 1 we discussed Fudo, right? This character from our Mikyo training that stands at the entrance to thresholds, right? Whether that's change, whether that's something that needs to be protected. And while Fudo has this appearance of being, demonic and things like that people often translate him as, that is only seen by those who try to do dumb shit, right? Fudo actually is very calm in the way he or she acts. It's not about aggression. It's not about those kind of things. Now, can that be seen or translated that way? Of course, right? An asshole is only an asshole to someone because that other person is doing things that the translator doesn't like or won't let them get away with or whatever. Okay. Now, are people dangerous or people, whatever. Okay. But we have to be careful with this subjectivity. Right. So if the flames or the sword or whatever cut, burn, that's because someone's encountering truth and something they don't want to have to look at, or they don't want to have to experience, or they don't want to have to put up with. All right. That being said, this episode, we're going to take a look at the next phase here. But this is actually a bridge to the next part, which we'll talk about later. But anyway, let me bring up, where the hell is it? There it is. All right. So who's on already? Let's see. So Dave Fletcher's on. Awesome. Kyle is on. Good evening. I will pass on your congratulations, Dave. Absolutely. Good evening, Maury. Glad you could make it. So I'm sure folks are still filtering in and whatnot. So, and I know we're close to the holiday. So technically, right, this is 2025. This is our Christmas edition, even though it's not on Christmas Day. But the way things tend to work out, next week will be our just prior to New Year's. It'll be our last one for 2025, and then the first one that I'll be doing in January. What is that date? That is January 5th. That episode, traditionally, I have kind of discussed a phrase that's used in Japan and whatnot, and how to look at that, and how the Japanese tend to see the new year and all those kind of things, right? So we'll take a look at that. I will hold off a discussion on Chinese New Year or the traditional Asian New Year, right, based on the lunar cycles, as I normally do until that time, which will be happening sometime in, I don't know, late January, early February. I have to look. I don't have it committed to memory. But anyway, what I want to do with this 3 episode series was to take a look at the beginning, the process, and the goal. Right. So next week is the goal. Right. Today we're going to talk about process, but also confusion and how things can be translated differently at different points in training. Right. And if we get stuck on one, that can actually prevent us from getting to the next thing. Okay. Before I jump into that, good evening, Alan. Thanks for signing in. So before I get into that, a couple of episodes ago, I made an announcement that I would be redoing 2 programs, right? Kind of updating things, so to speak, or I don't know, making some adjustments. One is Ninja Mind. So if anybody's ever gone through that, right? And another one is the Ninja no Hachimon program. So the Ninja Hachimon program, that'll be second on my list to do. That's the one that'll be updated. But after I've given some careful consideration to what students need to continue to progress and what needs to happen internally, externally, those kind of things. What can get in the way, those kind of things. I'm going to leave Ninja Mind the way it is, because that's actually about internal reorientation, not me telling anybody what they need to believe or see or whatever. This is Ninja Mind is part of, if you have my book, Seishin Teki Kyoyo, right? There are 11 aspects, right? Training aspects that are core pieces to that line item. Number 1, right, in the Togakure Ninjutsu lineage for Seishin Teki Kyoyo, abilities that the ninja had and worked on from early childhood. So if you have that in that book at the very beginning, I very clearly identified, and I think there's even if you got the full package, there was a list of other training areas and whatnot that would have come on board or been added or traded out or whatever at different points in history, right? Which is again one of those reasons why I really hate the word traditional. I only want to do it the traditional way. Okay, so which time period are we talking about, right? But anyway, those 11 core pieces stay, but Ninja Mind is actually an important part of the Mikyo that would have been brought in, or pre-Mikyo training that would have been brought in at a certain point in history, right? And so I'm going to leave that as it is, right? So instead of redoing Ninja Mind, what we're going to be doing, whatever folks decide they're going to join me for this, right after the new year. Okay, I'm not sure if we're going to start the first full week or the second full week after, but all that worked out, and I'll probably be releasing it right around Christmas Day. All right, Merry Christmas. So this is actually called the Ninpo Gateway program, and I'll talk about that later. Nothing's ready for registrations or anything like that, but this course is going to be based on core and critically important lessons that make up a huge part of the Bansen Shukai, of the Ninpiden, right, and the Shuninki to a lesser extent, but its focus is going to be on understanding correlation and relationships between Ninpo Taijutsu, Ninjutsu, and Ninpo, but also because this is still about mindset, this is still about understanding, this is still about perspective and the way a ninja thinks, we have to speak on and understand the differences between the way a genin, a chunin, and a jonin approach the exact same things. So that's the core of the program. The core of the program is the goal and the ideal is to be able to think like a jonin, because that's what Hatsumi Sensei is teaching everybody to be. That's why lessons feel incomplete. That's why people get upset because it feels like he's not, or it seems like he's not answering certain things the way they think he should, or that's why the taijutsu to a lot of fighter mentality people seems soft and whatnot, because he's teaching jonin and to some extent chunin level thinking using a genin mechanism, because that's what attracts people. Okay, but at the end of the day, the whole idea is in understanding these three mentalities and these three operational modes so that we can actually don the clothing, I guess, or wear the hat of, or whatever, right, of the particular station, because they're not ranks. I don't care what anime says. They're not ranks, right? You don't get promoted from one to another. Okay. We're going to be very, very clear about how that happened as well historically, not rank, but how these things played out, right? And why it's important to be able to function at all three levels in certain conditions or at different points or experiences or solving certain problems or whatever in our lives, and why it is detrimental to get stuck in any one. Okay. So to the people who've been involved for a long time, right, this is the gateway or the threshold that I was discussing last week with Fudo, and why certain things are going to be necessary to clip if you're going to go higher or you're going to go farther. Farther. If you lived around me, people say further, which anyway. So yeah. So instead of redoing, and I have lots of people that reached out and said, yeah, sign me up or whatever. Well, I didn't sign anybody up yet, but I'm not redoing Ninja Mind, because Ninja Mind is one of those things that when it's time to do the internal work, this is a clarification, realignment kind of program. Ninpo Gateway is kind of a parallel to the Ninja Hachimon, right? And I feel that there's a lot that I can do to clarify and update a lot of the lessons that I have in there, especially in how that would look in the 21st century. Because we live in a world where everybody's talking about modern ninjutsu, and what they're doing is they're stripping away things and they're adding things and they're making things look like what they think it should look like, because nobody does it that way and nobody carries swords, and no shit, right? But when principles and concepts are the basis of what you do, what it looks like on the outside will always change. Okay. Vehicles are vehicles. Sometimes they look like buggies that are pulled by horses. Sometimes they look like sleds. Sometimes they look like aircraft, right? Sometimes they look like a limousine. But a vehicle is a vehicle, right? And that's what we need to get our head wrapped around. But the premise of Ninja Hachimon, and the reason why I'm not changing the essence of it or the reason it was built, was because Ninja Hachimon was built to answer the question, what is ninjutsu and what are the core study areas that a school should be teaching and or a person should be practicing and studying to actually be able to say that they're studying ninjutsu. And this was a litmus test that was built way back in ancient Japan. Okay. So the core question is, how do we practice or how do we study something that we can't define, that we don't know what it is? And if we don't know that, then we're going to fall for every charlatan out there throwing a bunch of shit together and slapping the word ninja on it, or the word Bujinkan, or the word. Okay. So if we don't want to be yanked around by our short hairs, then we should probably know what the hell is going on. Anyway, so that's going to come afterwards. But Ninpo Gateway, right now, okay, this is not an easy course for most people, and I mean by duration, right? Right now, it's looking like it's going to be somewhere between a 10 and 15 week course. Okay? 15, 16, probably more likely than 10. Okay? Again, because there's a lot to be pulled from the Bansan Shukai, from the Shuninki, from the Ninpiden, for this level. And we're talking about different types of ninjutsu, different applications of the same things that might use the same words. One of the biggest things that are going to surprise people in the Ninpo Gateway program is, I remember I said Ninpo Taijutsu, and then there's ninjutsu, and then there's Ninpo, right? A lot of folks have been around for a while, and if you went through the current version, the legacy version of Ninja Hachimon, I discussed this. Same thing kind of happens in Mikyo as well, where the higher order by default encapsulates, it contains the other aspects, right? So Ninpo includes ninjutsu and Ninpo Taijutsu. Ninpo Taijutsu is Ninpo Taijutsu, variation of Budo Taijutsu. Right? Ninjutsu, that expands things out to all these other skills. If we're speaking on a Geinin level, it's not the same. Okay, it's a Chunin level, whatever. As soon as we talk about it from a Chunin level, ninjutsu gets defined very differently. Okay, very differently. Okay. So anyway, it'll be cool. It'll be fun, right? And don't worry about it, right? Just like all my programs, it'll be recorded, because anybody that's not in on the initial, where it's live and you get to interact and help tailor the program based on the questions and whatnot that come in, and problems that people bump into, and helping me refine things and whatnot, then it'll be available later as a recorded program. But the upside and the discount comes with helping the program launch. Okay. So and the live version also has assignments, so that you can actually work to get the stuff in. Now, that being said, if you have the Seishin Teki Kyoyo book and you've done some of that work, I will not be reteaching that again. That stuff is integrated into Nimpo Gateway, but I'll be making references to things because there's certain things that have to be understood and certain things that a student needs to be working on. It's kind of like just the way the Densho were written. Okay. Speaking of which, and I'm going to thank Sensei Alexander for gifting me Isu Sensei's book. So if anybody has it, that's awesome. But Isu Sensei says something in the introduction to this book that is how many of Hatsumi Sensei's books are written. He doesn't allude to that, but the approach he's taking, that he specifies, right? Same thing with Hatsumi Sensei's books, and also the same way, by and large, the Densho and the Makimono were written, where they're written for someone who already has a stable ground in the art to be able to understand what's going on. Hatsumi Sensei wrote a book a long, long time. Well, I guess technically he didn't write the book. He taught all the lessons, right? But a student collected all of their notes and compiled them into a book, right? And of course, gave Hatsumi Sensei credit and whatnot, right? But it's called Understand Good Play. I have always said that book is terrible, right? The best parts about the book for a new student is in the very beginning, where the 3 words that Hatsumi Sensei has used for decades, after he shows something or after he teaches something and he says, understand, good, play, whatever, right? He defines what he means and what he expects at those levels, or with each word, okay? And there might be 1 or 2 other things that are in that book, but that is the most important thing for beginners. Okay? The rest of it, if a student has not been in similar classes or actually in many of those classes, like they're not identified, but like I read the lessons, I'm like, holy shit, I was there for that one. Because there are no pictures. Sorry, Alan. No, I'm just kidding. Right. So I can see him chuckling now with his big mug of drink in his one hand and his Captain Kirk big comfy chair and whatnot in the other one. That's how I imagine Captain Kirk retiring. Right. I know it's in the movies that he dies, but anyway, spoiler alert for anybody that missed that one. So anyway, if you weren't there, don't have a grounding in sword or whatever the lesson is, it'll make no sense. Okay, because they're just little snippets. There's very little, if any, context wrapped around them, anything like that, right? It's just a compendium of notes based on these little micro lessons. Okay, so in this Gyokoryu book, Isuka Sensei, in the introduction, so for anybody that skips over introductions, don't do that. He very specifically says the context of this book is for those who have a proper grounding. That's not verbatim, but because it's based on his perspective, his learned experience, his insights that have come out of training, right? Very, very different. Very different, right? It's just like, any master that would have written something out and passed it down, right? They're not designed to be instruction manuals. They're designed to be reminders at best for someone who has already gone through the training. Okay, so as Dave says, speaking of books, I just received my book written by Daishian Fernando Exa on Shinden Fudo-ryu. It's a very nice book, lots of great clear pictures. Awesome. Okay, yeah, I'll patiently wait for my Christmas and/or birthday present from you as well. It's like you have a camera in my house. That's Alan. I just know you, brother. Anyway, All right. So anyway, I've discussed those things enough. So anyway, let's just see if anybody else jumped in here. So let's see. Fletcher, Maury, Allen. All right. So if you're on a different platform, and whatnot, I'm seeing Maury's on Facebook and a bunch of folks are over on YouTube and whatnot. But if you're on, check in, say hi. That way I know that you're here. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this because, as usual, this is a full lesson. I'm assuming that since everybody's replying and whatnot, that sound is okay and we're good. So, sporting a new Ninjutsu shirt that I picked up for this one only because of the NIN part, right? So, anyway, let me get over to my notes here so I won't drop the ball on anything. All right. So again, this is part 2 of our 3-part year-end transformational series. Again, last week we spoke about Fudo, immovability, clarity, and cutting through delusion, right? During this episode, we're going deeper into something most people think they understand. Okay? I did too at a certain point, right? But as we say in Mikyo, subject to change are all things. Okay. And that thing that people think they understand is NIN. Right. I'm going to say this very, very clearly and as simply as possible. Most people, including most martial artists, including most Bujinkan Ninjutsu students, misunderstand NIN entirely. Right. So I'm going to go into NIN more on top of what I'm doing tonight during this episode, during part 3, as we lead up to that discussion on the Tatsujin, right? But I think it's important that we start with a core misunderstanding about this concept, okay? And that is that most early translations, right, and most modern explanations tell you that NIN means endurance. And it does, literally. Right? You can look it up in a Japanese dictionary, right? It means or implies putting up with hardship, grinding, right? Surviving. Okay? When I first started, that's what I was taught. And that's where my head was for a long time. Okay? But, I've done a bunch of support lessons here recently leading up to this, right? We've had the at least the Whiteboard Wednesday, if not the KUDEN, where the discussion was wrapped around Okuden level training, okay? Shoden, Chuden, Okuden, and how Okuden is not like some secret, mysterious, if it is secret, it's because it's hidden right in front of your face. Not yours, everybody's. But it's not trickier, harder, more advanced techniques. It's about the internal work that would cause techniques to fail. So the kata at that level are their litmus test, right? So I've covered many different lessons leading up to this point where they were about transition. Okay? They were about transcendence, transcending one level for the next, right, on this path of mastery. Okay. So again, this is not me standing on some kind of pedestal or whatever. I think last week I said that part of the Fudo discussion was based on my current next time around the mandala, specifically focusing on Fudo. And I'm going to spend a lot of time on my own. This is a me thing in 2026, right? Cutting away things that are keeping me back from next level capabilities. Okay. So, but either way, right? This omote lesson, right, about endurance, about perseverance, right, about even patience, right? You know, I got that too, right? And that stuck for a long time. Okay. But we have to remember that the way we see things, the way we translate them, okay, anything new, Hatsumi Sensei's lesson, anything, even what we think Nijutsu means, right? We all translate new teachings through our existing filters, our existing beliefs, the way we define certain words, whatever, right? But here's the problem. If NIN were just about endurance, if it were just about accepting and putting up with the grind and surviving, then suffering would automatically produce mastery. And we all know that's not true. Okay. Well, at least most of us know that it's not true. And for those of you who didn't, I'm sorry for busting your bubble. No, I'm not. So anyway, all right. The reality is that some people suffer their entire lives and never become wiser, never become freer, never become more capable. So endurance alone is not the lesson. We've even talked about that in the past with this whole idea of enduring the process of endurance, right? Because it can get pretty harsh, right? But as I alluded to earlier, and there's going to be a big part of this Ninpo Gateway program, right? Survival mentality is basal level study and training, proficiency, ability. This is not about anybody. This is not about character flaws, anything like that, right? This is about missing pieces or transcending certain levels that if we hold on to them and we make it concrete, well, then we're just chaining ourselves down. Okay. So the reason I started with Fudo last time was because these definitions are some of the things that have to be snipped so that we're not chained to beginner training or limited stuff. Okay. All right. So just double check here, see if anybody else signed in. Again, if you signed in late, then you probably missed me saying that I'm my own speaker and producer and whatnot tonight, since Alexander is ill. So, all right. Good evening to some of the other folks that have Alyssa. Awesome. She and I have had some little dialogue back and forth. So, yeah, good. Welcome. All right. So again, he's ill and ill in a way that, like, it's not the sniffles. Okay. So, yeah. Anyway, so I'm just going to keep on going with this. All right. So what does NIN actually point to? All right. Well, what I didn't realize yet, right, at a certain point in my training, right, what only became obvious later is that NIN is not about enduring life. It's not about just putting up with shit. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I have my notes here or not. I'll try to remember. My experience with endurance and persevering and putting up with, the feel of it, the word doesn't even come into play anymore. It's very odd. It's sometimes difficult to explain things because words fail. But NIN is not about enduring life. NIN is about staying aligned with your path while life applies pressure to knock you off of it. Okay. So just like the student who, responded to my question online, the toughest lesson or the most important lesson that they've learned from the art is staying at it and finding a way when conditions are not great, right? That's a very different thing, right? So it's not about enduring life. It's about sticking with it as Hatsumi Sensei has always said, keep going, right? Staying aligned with your path while life, people, situations, experiences, pressures, problems, whatever, right? Applied pressure is trying to knock you off of it. Intentionally, unintentionally, directly, indirectly. Okay? Those are two very different things. Okay? Conventional endurance says, I'll put up with this and keep going. I'll survive. NIN, this Uda level, says, I remain oriented, aware, and capable even here, even now. Okay? That's where the skill sets for Ninpo come in, right? Because again, anybody can do things when conditions are perfect. Some of you have heard this story before, but I remember, being this, I don't know if I was private first class or I was a specialist or whatever when I was in the military. And we had this field training that was coming up. And I had heard that this storm front was coming in. And just I don't know, just fell out of my mouth, right? So, well, I guess that'll be postponed. And this senior NCO, the senior non-commissioned officer, said, no, I've been praying for this. And I said, why would you do that? And he goes, because anybody can do it when conditions are right. Okay? If we don't train in adverse conditions, then everything that we do, everything that we could be trying to do, could absolutely fall apart if this happens at the wrong time. So absolutely, I've been praying for this. I hope it rains cats and dogs. I hope the ground is so muddy that it's like a swamp. Because if you can do it during the worst of conditions, everything else is a cakewalk. But ego avoids bad conditions. We're going to wait till the rain stops before we train. Because, I only train outside. Or we're going to wait until it's not muddy. Or we're going to wait until we have an indoor location. Or I'm going to wait until I have a training partner. Or fill in the blank. Okay? So again, there's an omote and an uda side to this, right? And what we really need to take a look at here is why early teachings are incomplete on purpose. Okay? Incomplete on purpose. Okay? At best, they're expedients to get somebody started and to meet them where they already are and to where they already think. Okay? It's a perfect example of how omote and uda teachings work. At the outer level, quote unquote, endure hardship, it's an expedient teaching. Okay? People are experiencing hardship. They come to martial arts and they come to a bunch of different things or mentors or whatever to learn how to ease the pain, to ease the frustration, to ease the sense of loss, right? Or the fear of loss. I don't know more often, Sensei. Okay, so we talk about winning and losing. But the upper levels, we don't talk about winning and losing. It's not even a consideration because the battle's won before the guy even shows up. See, if I say that, right? People are like, well, how the hell do you even do that? Right? They think it's some kind of dark magic or whatever. Right? No. And it's not something that happens out there. Okay. But at a deeper level, on this uda side, right? Uda, backside, right? Omote, frontal, obvious, right? It's even depicting the front of your hand, right? And then uda is the backside, the hidden side, right? I know we can see the back of our hand, right? But other people can't, right? It's the hidden side. It's the stuff they can't see. Just like the light side of the moon, the dark side of the moon, right? The moon does rotate. It just does it in a way that matches our rotation around the sun, which is pretty freaking amazing. Anyway, but at this deeper level, at this okuden level, right, NIN is revealed as something else entirely. Right? It's not tolerance. It's not waiting. It's not resignation. Right? What you find is that it's internal regulation under pressure. Again, that's why I started with Fudo last week. Okay. It's not that the storm isn't raging, right? The iconography of Fudomyo, right? I have a statue. It's in storage or whatnot, but I have this statue that, he's standing, he's on a rock, and these wavy lines, and it's a sculpture. So, but it's ocean waves just crashing at this thing, right? And then the flames, everybody sees the flames. Oh, Fudo has flames. Yeah, except the flames are fanned sideways, which means the winds are blowing. And there he is, there she is, standing, resolute, upright, right? Not in defiance of them, but regardless, right? It doesn't matter that those things are happening. What needs to happen will happen regardless of whether the conditions are perfect, they're less than perfect, or they're shitty. Huh? And let's look at the word waiting, right? And why waiting? Because people, and I did myself, right? We think of enduring or persevering or whatever as in putting up with until what shit happens later, right? Which is waiting. Okay? One of the books that all my kids, all my grandkids have gotten, a little note from grandpa or a little note from dad right inside the front cover, is a Dr. Seuss book called Oh, the Places You'll Go. And in that book, there is this one part where he talks about, with even with all the monsters and all this kind of stuff, the worst place you could end up in is a place called the waiting place, where people are waiting. They're waiting to go. They're waiting for something to come. They're waiting for a phone call. They're waiting for a shitload of things, right? What's happening there is nothing. Okay. So I want to talk about why waiting is the wrong word. Okay. And this is both in physical self-defense and in life applications. Okay. People can't wait to retire. Okay? And then they retire. And then a lot of folks, right? I've got students that are retired and whatnot, but they're like, they dive into the martial arts training or whatever. They come up with something that gives them that sense of purpose. But other people, their bodies deteriorate faster, their minds deteriorate faster. Shit, they fall apart, they die quickly. Right? What are they doing? Well, they're waiting for that doctor's appointment, or they're waiting for honey to have something for them to do, or waiting for lunch, and then they eat lunch, and then they're going to watch TV while they're waiting for dinner, and then they're going to watch some more TV or sit out on the porch and drink a lemonade while they're waiting for bedtime. And, well, fuck me. Excuse my language. I apologize. No, I don't. Anyway, so sounds like hell to me personally. But anyway, even in physical self-defense, right? People say things like, all right, imagine like somebody grabbing a bear hug or something like that, right? You endure the grab, right? And you wait for that right moment. Okay. When somebody grabs me like that, I used to be that guy too, right? But when somebody waits for me, or when they grab, right, I'm not waiting. Okay. But see, when I say that, people think I'm jumping right to action. Well, I am. You just can't see the action. Right? Can't see Sensei's action, any of them. Okay. Because we're not waiting. What looks like waiting is actually directed awareness, strategic thinking. We're sensing shifts. We're conserving energy, right? We're not moving things that are not instrumental in protecting ourselves, right? And with that said, we're protecting structure, right? We're doing enough to protect structure, to protect from damage without signaling intent. Nothing about that is passive. Zero. Right? But that's where people get thrown off, because if they don't see movement, they think nothing is happening. But by the time you see movement, it's too late. Okay? If I'm grabbed in a bear hug or whatever the thing is, right? I'm not putting up with the grab until he gives me an opening or whatever, right? I'm managing reality until action becomes inevitable, right? Our muscles operate on burning fat, burning a sugar called glycogen, right? It's actually stored in localized muscle. That's what allows us to do something very quickly, but for a short amount of time, right? Runners keep a certain pace, and all of a sudden they'll do what's known as a wind sprint, and they'll just cook it off like 7 to 11 seconds, and then they have to go back to pacing, right? Because they're cooking through that glycogen, because it burns way faster and it's ready and available. And then they have to go into this holding pattern so the body can put the glycogen back for the next burst. You see it in fights, you see it in all kinds of activities, right? So if I know that that's going on, then I learn that there's a certain feel to his body, because he can't sustain that immobilizing strength forever. He can't sustain it for more than 7 to 11 seconds. Right? And so what I need to do is manage my energy expenditure, right? I am going to be firing certain muscles so that he doesn't crush and crack ribs or make breathing difficult, cut down on my oxygen intake, my breathing, those kind of things, right? So those are firing just enough to maintain structure and to protect. But everything else that's not instrumental, I'm not going to be bouncing around with it. I'm not going to be jamming it. I'm not even going to be holding my breath. Okay? Because every muscle that fires is cooking off the glycogen in those muscles. What I'm waiting for is a telltale shift. It's not like he re-grabs. Sometimes they do. But there is a feel, a tactile feel, when that glycogen in those arms runs out. And he has to hold that position. And then I can use my glycogen. Okay, then I can go into action. But if someone's looking and they don't understand what's going on, they don't get it. Okay? And I know how this sounds a little, I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't sound woo, right? When I say I'm managing reality until action becomes inevitable. But I'm going to have to break this grip, right? It's inevitable that something has to give. So I just need to, right? There's some patience. That's the omote side. But the NIN is, can I not freak out? Can I manage reality? Mine and his. So he has no clue what's going on, but I'm actually proactively paying attention to things. So when the moment arrives, the inevitability is on my side. Okay. Let me switch back here. Sorry, James is normally doing this. Questions, comments, anything? I don't see anything at the moment. I'm going to keep clipping through here because, as usual, I have a lot. All right. So let's connect this to KUDEN training, right? So if anybody's been or was in on that Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday, where I took everybody through Shoden level training and what it's really about. It's not beginner training. even though it's given to beginners. But you can be studying not Shoden kata, but you can be trapped in a Shoden level mindset in very high level belt rankings, depending on who graded you and what they were looking for. Okay. Shoden is about giving you the most important, critical, core principles and concepts of that particular lineage first. Right. And the kata start from a static base, and it's about teaching and learning very specific lessons. Chuden usually flips that on its ear. I think the lineage I borrowed for that presentation was Kotoryu. And so Shoden level Kotoryu kata, the attack comes, you back away, and what you're doing is identifying that singular point or line that when you come back in, you can take him down with as little effort as possible. Okay. The lineage says with one finger. That doesn't mean you're going to use one finger. It means that you've precisely identified that point. But the reality is that kata at that level they're showing you in a position where you're late. If the attack is already on its way to you, then you did not manage conditions to be able to meet it on time when he is trying to generate power. So you couldn't jam that. You couldn't meet it at that moment to prevent that. And you certainly didn't control conditions to where his technique was going to collapse before it even got started. Okay. And this is when I'm saying you in the third person. This is not about you because you guys are all enlightened, right? But in that condition, we're late. Okay. Chuden in the Kotoryu flips it. And unfortunately, if everybody's just trying to learn from like YouTube videos or video programs and there's nobody there to teach you what the hell's going on, right? Chuden, I know it did for me. Chuden looked like me as the defender is just walking up to this guy and putting a whoop ass on him and calling it a day, which people with the fighter mindset are like, yeah, buddy, except try to explain that in court, okay, and not go to jail and have to worry about defending yourself in a prison shower. So what's really going on, and again, you learn the technique, right? You learn the kata, the shu level, SHU, not what you wear on your feet, okay? You copy it, and then you start to work with it, right? So now this level is about dynamics. This level is about doing everything you did at the Shoden level before contact is made and before the attack is launched. So one of the introductory lessons at the Chuden level is understanding that there are certain conditions that if you let him go first, you're going to die. Okay. And so this is about what we might call sen no sen. It's one of the principles we're going to work with during our Daikomyo Sai coming up here in a couple of weeks. I'm initiating my movement upon his intent to move or to attack, not upon his attack. Okay. Gono sen is Shoden level stuff, right? Gono sen is I initiate my movement upon his attack. Sen no sen is I initiate my movement upon his intent to attack. At that level, we have to understand that thinking about attacking is attacking because the body starts to do certain things. As soon as we have that thought, as soon as we make that decision to go, the body starts doing things, and we need to be tuned into that so we can meet him during the power generation phase. Right? So again, Daikomyo Sai is about this Gyokoryu, what we might call the 0 point of resistance, whereas the body's getting into position to generate speed, strength, stability, those kind of things. There's literally He's literally in a weakened position, okay? Which makes no sense to most people because people think, well, he's reaching out and grabbing. He's strong. He's reaching out quickly. He's fast. Yeah, but what does the body have to do to create that speed? What does it have to do to create that strength? What does it have to do to create that stability? Okay? This is not kindergarten lesson. Okay, this is not there's anybody not knowing these things. This is not a character flaw. This is not being broken. This is not being ignorant, stupid. This is ignorant, not knowing. There's certain things that we don't know. So that's why there's this transcendence to a new level, right? But Chuden training doesn't stop at this. Get him first before he gets you, because if he gets the first shot off, then you're going to lose. It's not just that, right? The training transitions to either I'm walking toward him, he's walking toward me, or we're walking toward each other. Kind of like those situations that we all laugh at, right? Because we're walking along. We could be in the mall or at some park or whatever. We're walking along on a sidewalk, and we suddenly realize that we're walking right at somebody, and we sidestep, and they recognize that they're going to walk into somebody, so they sidestep, and we happen to freaking sidestep in the same direction, and then instinctively we make the corrective action, step in the opposite direction. Well, they do the same thing, and there's a little dance that happens on the sidewalk or whatever, right? And we chuckle about it and walk on, and then forget this person's face within 52 seconds. But there are those situations where we're walking along, realize we're about to step into somebody, we sidestep, they sidestep. We think we're having one of those moments. We sidestep the other way, they sidestep. And then we realize, based on facial micro expressions and body language and eye movement or lack of and whatnot, that, oh shit, he's doing this on purpose. There's a problem, right? And so all the stuff we did at Shoden, by stepping away to identify, we're identifying all this stuff as we're coming together. And we learned that there's a point just before he can go where his brain is calculating. And so when he hits that point, I go. And I already know what his weak points are. I already know where I can go from here based on environment, footing, all that kind of stuff. And so the kata is showing ways to shut that down. So he is attacking. He's already, the threat and intimidation is already going on. The approach, all that kind of stuff is going. Beating him to the punch isn't a matter of speed. It's a matter of timing and distance. It's very different, right? So people get that. So, okay, that's more difficult than the Shoden stuff because, like, I got to, okay, yeah, I know. We're just looking at it differently, right? And then they make the assumption that Okuden, right, it's just deeper, trickier, more difficult, whatever. What makes it more difficult at that level is getting rid of the shit that we have going on the inside, like assumptions and stuff like that, that actually get in the way and can cause our downfall. Always doing the same shit the same way. And we don't realize that the guy that's approaching us has already seen us fight a couple of times before. And so he's already ready for that. Or we're so tunnel visioned on him that we don't recognize, let alone believe it to be possible, that his friend can come up and hit us in the back of the fucking head with a stick. Okay. Because all the training we do is whatever. Okay. So again, we all know this, right? Because we're prepared defenders, right? But when we tie this into this Okuden, right, this is what I was talking about. Okay. At this level, you're no longer reacting to problems. You're managing conditions before problems fully form. Okay. That's NIN in motion. And I would apologize if this is confusing to you, but I won't. Okay. Because confusion isn't a sign that the teacher needs to be more clear. Confusion, frustration, whatever, isn't a sign that the world has to do anything different to make things easier for us. This is a NIN concept as well. These things, confusion, frustration, pain, whatever, are symptoms of a lack of understanding that we're going to have to work out. Okay. And we don't have to wait to get into the dojo for this. We don't have to wait until we're working with contrived models or kata. Okay. We can be working NIN in life all the time. Right. And working at getting us away from, there's always something, whatever, right? This getting out of survival mode, right? This is the opposite of survival mode thinking, right? Survival mode says there's always something. I'll deal with it when it breaks, right? You know, that one, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Yeah, there's some bridges you don't want to wait till you get there, right? I'll handle it when it gets bad enough, whatever. Okay. NIN says there will always be something, and I don't need to suffer preemptively because of that. Okay. Some people are so in survival mode that as soon as one problem is solved, they can't enjoy life because they're just waiting for the next penny to drop. And in the US here, we won't be dropping pennies for too much longer once they're out of circulation, right? But anyway, or they're in denial, or they're trying to cheat the system so that it doesn't happen, or whatever. But you can always tell when that failed, when collapse occurs, because they either go into escape mode, or they're pissed off, or anger sets in, all that kind of stuff, right? I just knew there'd be something. Yeah. What, you think that you're exempt from cause and effect, and exempt from the rules of life, and exempt from, right? Life is supposed to leave you alone. No. Okay. So one of the first freeing lessons is that there will always be something. Right? But I don't need to suffer preemptively because of that. Right? I had a girlfriend once that as soon as she knew that I set a date to go to Japan, right, for some training or whatever, right, and I usually just didn't tell her until the last, like, 2 weeks or week or whatever, right? But I could tell her a couple of months out, and then I'd remind her, right? And she would ruin the time that we had before I departed, because the suffering would already kick in because she'd already started missing me, and there I was right in front of her. Okay. Now, before we laugh at how silly that is, we need to ask ourselves how much time we burn up either trying to avoid something that should just be handled, or we ruin time. We ruin the experience, right? Okay. Because we can enjoy our life, right? You enjoy your life, you stay present, you stay aware, and when action is required, you act early, cleanly, and decisively. And then you get back to enjoying your life, staying present, staying aware. I remember seeing it was kind of a story. One of my early teachers in the art, Jack Hoban, former Marine captain himself, he was he was hired to come in and teach some Marine recruits some self-defense stuff and whatnot. He was covering it from this whole warrior ship ninjutsu kind of thing, right? And the story was about how one of the Marines, during a Q&A at the end, said, how do you do it? How do you reconcile having this kind of ability and being like a happy, loving person? And Jack said, we want to live a happy, successful life, right? I don't know that some people do. Some people get so involved in martial arts that, like, martial arts is my life, right? Those people need a life. I understand enjoying enjoying martial arts for the sake of enjoying martial arts, all that kind of stuff. But like they're talking about being like this unkillable killer and those kind of things, right? That person is leading from fear and insecurities and all kinds of things. And that's something that Okuden training and Ninpo, the Ninpo Gateway program is going to be not hashing out for anybody, because it's just there to lay out the information, and there's weekly assignments and all that kind of stuff. But before anybody goes trying to use ninja mindset and tactics and things like that on other people, one of the most important things that has to happen is we have to clear ourselves, right? We have to work the lessons on ourselves, okay? Because otherwise, if we don't, we're just going to be like any other manipulative con man jackass in the world, causing damage. Right. So anyway, what he said was, we all want to be, want to live this happy, enjoyable life, hug my wife, or play with the dogs, all this kind of stuff, right? But if something happens that I could not prevent, if something comes into my world, we can handle it cleanly, decisively, and quickly, and then get back to our happy life. Okay? Because that's what was necessary in the moment. But when that moment's not there, I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm not going to waste my life doing things that doesn't add to the enjoyment of life. But here's the thing. Most people are either on or off. They're either one thing or they're something else, and they believe that that is right and correct. Okay? So when they're enjoying life, they're not vigilant. So people in martial arts or self-defense realm think that they have to be vigilant all the time, and then they're missing out on life. But two things can be true at the same time. Okay? We can enjoy our lives, but stay present, stay aware. Okay? Without being hypervigilant, without being paranoid, those kind of things, right? But these are skills that are learned, and they're abilities that are developed. They're insights that are discovered. They're not things that we can learn in a podcast or in a class or whatever, or in a seminar, memorize, and then just solve for X out of 20 problems on a homework sheet like we did in school. It doesn't work like that. Okay. All right. So before I shift back, I want to talk about Fudo here again here a little bit, because I want to talk about where these two concepts kind of meet. And again, there's much more for me to go into the next episode. But before I do that, again, I'm my own producer here, so let me put on the Sensei Alexander hat, shift over and check the chat. Let's see. Dave Fletcher says, in Japan, we trained in typhoon conditions. It was pretty exhilarating. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I used to go out of my way. I remember one time we were training in Canada in the dead of winter. I mean, like the snow was like thigh, almost hip deep. Your taijutsu has to be different. Was in England one time, and we set up training. We were at a boys' camp, like one of these summer camp kind of places, and it had a pool. So we got into the shallow end, which was still thigh, hip deep kind of thing. No diving at that end, right? And we did our training in there, okay? Because we have to learn that taijutsu is different in different conditions. Taijutsu is different for a jonin than it is for a chunin, and they're both way different than it is for a genin. Because one's about survival, one's about condition manipulation, and one's about doing and acting in a way that the threat never comes. Well, why do you need taijutsu? Because some shit slips by. It's kind of like in Mikyo, right? If you understand the mandala, even if you don't, right? This character we talked about last week, Fudomyo, stands at the threshold of transition. Think about a gate guard, okay? There is Fudomyo And then there's this character, Gozanzemyo. Gozanzemyo is my protective character, right? Gozanze Fudo is the immovable one. Okay. So he's not being rocked by drama, emotional shit, guilt, whatever. Okay. And it's not because he doesn't care. He does care. But he's not being knocked off track by manipulation. Okay. Or by stuff that does not serve the path. Okay. It's kind of like when my sister passed away. I helped with preparations and servers, all that kind of stuff. Everybody else was like, falling apart. Okay. They still think I was cold and non-responsive and uncaring and all that kind of stuff because after all that was taken care of and they were re-regulated, right? I had my own little mourning, but in private, because I didn't need to make a show of things like that, right? And I'm not arguing with anyone about whether or not I mourned, because it doesn't matter whether or not they believe it to be true. I don't need to be perceived as right by anyone. That is Fudo. Fudo stands at the threshold, right? Gozanze, destroyer of evil in the three realms, okay? Past, present, and future. It's a whole bunch of other things, okay? That's the one who like cuts through the shit that's happening. Okay, so Fudo prevents it from happening. Stand at the gate, prevent bullshit from getting through. Gozanze stands just behind him to handle the shit that happens to slip through. Okay, so Gozanze is that part of our body, our mind, and whatnot. That's while we're enjoying life. Okay, don't get so caught up in things. You enjoy life, right? But we don't forget that, bad people still exist, right? So, but there's this Fudo characteristic that the more skilled you get, the more proficient you get, right? The more secure in your own skin you get. The more you communicate that you can handle yourself. Even when you're laughing and having a good time and all that kind of stuff, it's just there's something about the presence that doesn't exist in someone who has to present themselves as strong, who has to present themselves, who has to lead with this. That's easily read, okay, as projection, right? But the more you get the ninpo side, the more you get these other qualities. You don't get them, you develop them. They develop, right? The more it just gets conveyed, right? And then the less anybody wants to argue or threaten or come at you or whatever. Hudson City talked about this once. So the irony is the longer you're training and the better you get, the less likely you're going to have to use the physical skills. Okay? Well, then why learn them? Because shit can still slip through. Some people are deaf. Some people feel threatened by somebody who's confident in their own skin. So just in case, we have to be able to do what needs to be done. Right? So anyway, all right, my friend from South America, how are you? Feliz Navidad. Let's see. I'll get back to my notes over here. Okay, so this is where Fudo and Nin meet. Right? Fudo cuts delusion. Nin maintains alignment. Okay? Together, they produce the Tatsujin. Right? It's often translated as the human being developed to their fullest potential. But today, I want to describe the Tatsujin as the person who moves through chaos without being consumed by it. Like, can you walk into a room or a situation or somebody just unloading drama and not get sucked into it? All right? No, you don't have to become an asshole and yell and scream and all that kind of stuff to make it go away, because now you just created two enemies, right? You just threw gasoline on a fire. Okay? But this is no different than when students are talking about, situations and how they're, it's affecting them and stuff like that. And I say, I understand. Okay. I remember a time when, whatever. Okay. Often what they miss is me saying, I remember a time when. Are there still some things that pull me in? Yes. However, when I say pull me in, they start pulling me in and I cut it off. And I try to convey these stories as well. Okay. It's like day of my mom's surgery. My sister, we're just having this discussion. Next thing you know, it rolled over to my stepdad, her dad, being an ass, and she hated him, and it just rolled into all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, right, I get it, right? I'm not letting that affect me. Did it initiate the drive for me to get into law enforcement, to get into, martial arts and self? Absolutely, right? But I got to tell you, had he not been that way, and she started to come, don't justify him. You gonna let me finish my story, or are you just going to keep overlaying your story on mine? Okay, you can tell your story. Okay. So just whatever you want to say, just hold it. Because what I need to tell you is, had he not been that way, had he not toughened me in multiple directions to where basic training was pretty much a cakewalk. Because once I found out they couldn't hit me, yelling and screaming at me, dude, I got this. All right. But not just that, right? I was in counterterrorism operations, black market, undercover investigate, all kinds of things, right? I was in situations where had he not been him and I didn't have to survive that. That was part of my omote training long before I knew what ninjutsu was a name. I don't know that I'd have survived those things. Now, she still went away, thinking that I was justifying things. Not my fault. Not my problem. Not my drama. Not my karma. I know everybody says not my monkeys, not my zoo or circus or whatever the hell it is. Okay. But that gets extended to a lot of other things. Okay. Somebody's karma. It's not my fault. And if it is, then that's part of my karma as well. These are just different perspectives. It's not woo-woo. It's understanding the primary law of the universe, which is cause and effect. Religion aside, you can believe whatever you want. Okay? Every action produces at least one reaction. Cause and consequence, cause and effect, whatever. Okay? Strip away morality, strip away ethics, and the universe is coldly impersonal. It doesn't hate you. It just does what it does because those are the laws. Gravity and all those kind of things, right? You don't have to believe in gravity for gravity to exist. It doesn't need your permission or your validation. Not you. I'm talking to some third party kind of person, right? It doesn't need it. Right? Truth does not need validation. Lies need validation. Truth does not need validation. Okay? So again, this is where Fudo and Nin meet. Okay? Fudo cuts delusion. Nin maintains alignment. Think about that Fudo imagery that I gave you, right? Okay. There's a sword, there's a rope, there's flames, right? This handles the delusion stuff. Okay. But that uprightness, right? In the face of that storm, that's internal. Okay. Together they produce this Tatsujin. And that's why Hatsumi Sensei said, I'm not teaching you how to fight. I'm teaching you how to live. Might you have to fight? Sure. Might you have to put up with drama? Sure. It's all part of life. Huh? Not teaching you to fight. That's a limited box in your entire lifetime. Might pop up more for some people, less for others, or whatever, but it also doesn't have to be a fist. People fight all the time. And sometimes the argument they have with other people is in their own fucking head, or they just walk around mumbling about it. Still having a fight, right? The physical part, interacting with the other person, ended how long ago? Meanwhile, they're still carrying it when they could be enjoying their life, could be relaxing. So they're either still handling that fight or fabricating or anticipating the next one. Wow. People worry about catching up on sleep. They don't worry about catching up on happiness. Anyway, again, what I'm talking about is insights and whatnot, that these are not memorized lessons. These are insights and whatnot that are based on doing the work. Okay. Getting past the programming. Doing all that cutting of fetters, from Fudo. My other times around the mandala. Starting another pass. Connections will be different. The insights will be different. The goal is for the abilities and capabilities to be different. Better, easier, smoother. Okay. But again, this is not a matter. It's not a matter of like failings or an indication that somebody's broken or whatever. I mean, because I went through that too. Right? I wasn't broken. I was confused based on prior programming or assumptions I made or whatever. Right? So the trick is in addressing the confusion without shame, without guilt, without taking it personally. Just a part of the process. Okay? So before we talk about that and I wrap this thing up, let me just see if anything else popped up. Let's see. Good evening. Japan, typhoon, Western. Richard Demio. Hey, my friend, how are you? Good evening. Awesome. Okay, cool beans. I don't think this is going to be as long as the other ones because I'm really trying to hold a chunk of this NIN aspect for the next one because of the way it ties in, and I don't want to steal any thunder from our discussion on the Tatsujin. Okay, so in the next episode, next week's episode, part 3 of this 3-part thing, we're going to break down the kanji again. And I know a lot of you have been through lessons with me as I've broken it down and discussed the blade over the heart and 2 aspects and things like that. We're going to, again, this is from a higher level. This is from a ninpo level. It's from an okuden level. Okay. So when we break these 2 parts, right? The kisaki or the toll, people often, even Hatsumi Sensei, right, made it really simple for people. Toll, right? Can you see this? Right. For those of you on audio only, obviously can't see it. I'm pointing at my shirt at a nin symbol, right? This shinobu kanji. So this top piece right here, right, is often translated as toll for blade, right? Blade over the heart, right? Except it's not the blade. Okay, it's part of the blade. This little stroke right here, when that's absent, and all you have is, see, we can do it backwards this way, and this downstroke, right? That's toll. As soon as you add this little piece right here, okay, that bisects it, you're pointing at the kisaki, the edge of the blade, the most dangerous part. Okay? And then, of course, the kanji below is shin, kokoro, your heart, your core, right? It's the mind, heart. It's you. It's what makes you you. It's not just the organ, okay? Your heart, okay? This is that thing that enjoys life. This is that thing that gives life purpose. This is that thing that you share with others. This is that part of you that, is attracted to this stuff and whatever, right? It's the part that deserves to be protected. Right? So I'm going to break that down differently in this transformational way, again, from this higher level. So it's not, right? I promise, not even my closest students have heard this breakdown because it hasn't been time yet. But time or not, it's no time like next episode. All right. So let's see. I don't see anything else. So let me just jump back into this. All right. Where are my notes? There we go. Okay. So we already did the addressing confusion. There we go. Right. Be nice to yourself. Okay. Western academia, with its pass and fail and letter grades and whatnot, and you take a test once and then you're screwed for life or whatever, right? Remember two things. One, straight A's never made anybody rich. And two, that structure doesn't allow you to learn from your mistakes. It doesn't allow you to grow. Okay. Every once in a while, you'll get a teacher who will allow you to do a pre-test to see how well you'll do on the test. But tests have this sense of finality, and what they don't teach you how to do is to fail forward and adjust on the fly and improve the game plan through experience. So we approach something like this and we think it's the same thing. We sweat upcoming tests, or we're glad that in certain circles they don't do those damn formal tests because they're stupid, and right, just give me the rank when you think I'm ready for it. And yeah, no, I'll know that you're ready for it for sure when I apply some pressure and I see how well you can remember things, or if things collapse under pressure, because NIN is about not collapsing under pressure. Pressure is part of life. I know. Doesn't sound like that in the current social structure where we're supposed to make things easy for everyone, alleviate frustration. If you even hint at the school of hard knocks or whatever, well, then you're uncaring, you're oppressive, you're name a whole bunch of just whatever names people think they can throw at you to get you to back off and let them be successful or feel successful without the process that produces a resilient, strong, adaptable, successful person that can fail, pick themselves back up, run the process again, and reclaim everything that they lost the first time through. Seems to be a strange concept. Okay. So this is why programs like Seishin Teki Kyoyo and Ninja Mind exist. It's why I created them, right? They're not about adding techniques, although most people seem to want to do technique collection, right? They're about removing the internal distortions that prevent alignment under pressure. Okay? And in the new year, like I said, I'm going to actually open the doors here just before the new year because I want to hit the ground running. Okay. So first or second week, full week in January, right? We're going to take a group through this next phase of this level of work. Okay. So I'll be opening enrollment here shortly, right after the new year. We're going to dive into Ninpo and ninjutsu from a different level of understanding. But to do that, we also need to be able to look at what does ninjutsu look like for a genin ninja? What does ninjutsu look like for a chunin ninja? And what does ninjutsu look like for a jonin ninja? And this is not about rank. This is not about learning about them and going, oh, okay, I'm going to do that one. Because if you do that, it's like jumping out of the frying pan into the hot pot. So you want to drown in boiling water, or do you want to fry in Crisco? Pick something. Okay, it's not that. right? It's learning them so that you can change uniforms or roles or whatever to best fit the conditions and situation. Okay. So for those who are ready to go beyond correction and into conscious application, well, if you know, you know, right? So we'll take a look at wrapping up with some uh, questions, last minute questions or comments. But for this episode, to kind of round this out, I want you to sit with this. NIN is about it, is not about enduring damage, just gritting and getting through it, right? That's survival mindset. Okay. It's not that there isn't an aspect of ninjutsu that is for that. There is, but that's not the ideal in ninjutsu. That's certainly not what ninpo is about. Okay. It's about remaining oriented even when life tries to disorient you, but it's not a survival mode thing. Okay. And that's not something you learn once. It's something you live, which is why the new program will have ongoing assignments. Okay. So that you can actually work on it and not go through some kind of educational amassing of data process. All right. All right. So again, next week we complete this arc, right, by addressing NIN, the kanji, and the making of what the Japanese call a tatsujin. Okay. So before I wrap this up and we get out of here, any last minute questions or comments? Thank you very much for this great lesson. You're welcome. Totally. Anybody else? I don't see anything. So, guys, I appreciate it. I'm sorry that Sensei Alexander couldn't make it for this one. Very, very ill. Right? He sent me this last minute thing. He had to sit it out, but he was sitting it out, if you understand. Anyway, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I will talk to everybody next time on KUDEN.
Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.